Put that tray down. Flagged visitors do not eat from this line. What code did you enter? Dr. Simone Avery stopped in Ashford College's dining hall, both hands beneath a gray tray. A bowl of soup trembled beside an apple and a carton of milk. The card reader had flashed green. Approved. Simone saw it. So did Rosa Delgado, the shift supervisor beside the register. But Margaret's gloved finger moved across the screen. She closed the approval window, entered 3 characters, then turned the monitor away. R17. Margaret looked up as if the question were an offense. People using questionable passes do not challenge staff, she said. Simone slid the temporary meal pass forward. The issue time was printed beneath the code. Margaret barely glanced at it. She snatched the tray, dumped the meal into the trash, and dropped the pass beside it. A woman near the drink station raised her phone. They caught someone stealing student meals, she whispered. No one corrected her. Rosa stared at the floor. Simone looked at the discarded pass, then at the hidden screen. Please preserve that transaction record, she told her. Margaret smiled. You are in no position to tell this university what to preserve. By sunset, those 3 characters would matter more than anyone in that room understood. Then the security doors opened. 90 minutes before the security doors opened, Simone Avery stood beneath the stone archway at Ashford College and watched 3 families hurry past her toward the administration building. The campus had been designed to make people lower their voices. Red brick, white columns, old trees, brass plaques polished until they reflected the sky. Simone unfolded the campus map she had printed at home. She smoothed the crease against the side of her leather bag, wrote 1037 in the upper corner, and looked once toward the nearest exit before stepping inside. It was a habit so ordinary she no longer noticed herself doing it. At the reception desk, a young man in a navy sweater glanced up from his computer. Dining services interviews are through the east entrance, he said. Simone paused. I'm here to see my niece. The young man's expression changed only slightly. Family orientation? She's already enrolled. He pointed across the lobby without asking her name. Student services can help you. Simone thanked him anyway. Near the stairs, a stack of folders slipped from the arms of a student using a white cane. Papers spread across the marble floor. 2 parents stepped around him without slowing. Simone crouched, gathered the pages in order, and placed them back beneath the elastic band. You had them numbered, she said. The student smiled with relief. Most people don't notice. My mother numbered everything. She walked him to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited until the doors opened before continuing. Outside, a silver SUV stopped beside the curb. A woman in a camel-colored coat hurried toward Simone and held out a set of keys. Can you bring it around at 12? Simone looked at the keys, then at the woman. I think you want the valet stand. The woman followed Simone's glance to the sign 20 feet away. Oh. Nothing else. Simone handed the keys back. They're under the green awning. By the time she reached the courtyard, she had been directed toward dining services twice and maintenance once. No one had been openly cruel. Each moment was small enough to dismiss. Together, they formed a weight people expected her to carry quietly. Nyla finally appeared near the library steps, one strap of her backpack hanging loose from her shoulder. You're early, Nyla said. You're late. Nyla smiled, but it did not last. At 19, Nyla had her mother's narrow face and the same habit of pressing her lips together when she did not want to answer. Simone had helped raise her after her sister died. She knew when Nyla was pretending to be fine. They hugged. Nyla felt lighter than she had 3 weeks earlier. Have you been eating? Simone asked. Nyla pulled back. That's your first question? It moved ahead of how are your classes? My classes are fine. That wasn't the question. Nyla adjusted her backpack. The food here isn't great. Simone looked toward the dining hall. Students moved through the glass doors carrying trays. Then let me confirm that for myself. Nyla's eyes shifted away. We could go off campus. You have a meal plan. It glitches sometimes. What kind of glitch? Nyla started walking. The kind where you stand there while everyone behind you acts like you're holding up their whole life. The answer was too practiced. Simone did not press her yet. At the family services office, an older receptionist named Mrs. Bell printed a temporary meal pass and slid it across the counter. This covers one guest meal, Mrs. Bell said, valid until 6. Simone read the time beneath the QR code, then placed the pass flat inside the map so the corners would not bend. Mrs. Bell smiled. You keep paper like my father did. He believed a folded page invited someone to ignore it. The words came out before Simone could stop them. For a moment, she was 20 again, standing beside a cafeteria register at another school while a supervisor held her meal card between 2 fingers. The woman had asked where Simone had gotten it, not whether it worked, not whether it belonged to her, where she had gotten it. Simone had been on scholarship. She had also been hungry. She remembered the line behind her, the heat climbing into her face, and the fear that one complaint might be enough for someone to decide she was more trouble than her tuition was worth. So she had stepped aside. She had missed lunch, and for years afterward, she had told herself that silence had been maturity. Nyla touched her arm. You okay? Simone folded the memory away, though not the paper. I'm fine. They entered the dining hall shortly before noon. The room was bright and loud, trays sliding over metal rails and chairs scraping across the floor. Nyla moved automatically toward a narrower station along the far wall. Simone stopped. The main line is here. The other line is faster. There were 6 students waiting at the smaller station. All 6 were Black or Latino. The main line held more than 30 students of every background. A sign above the smaller station read, Assisted Meal Access. Simone looked at Nyla. Nyla said, Please don't make this a thing. I haven't made anything. They joined the main line. When their turn came, Rosa Delgado stood behind the register. Her name tag was scratched along one edge. Simone gave her the pass and watched her scan it. The screen flashed green. Rosa glanced at Simone. You're all set. Simone placed soup, bread, an apple, and a carton of milk on a gray tray. Nyla reached for nothing. Then a woman in a white manager's coat looked over from the next station. Her eyes moved from Simone to the green screen, then to Nyla. She crossed the space between them without hurrying. Why did you let her into the main line? Margaret Klein asked. Rosa's hand remained near the register. The pass cleared, she said. Margaret Klein did not look at her. She looked at Simone. Set the tray down. Simone placed it on the metal rail. My pass was issued by Family Services 10 minutes ago, she said. The time is printed beneath the code. Margaret held out her hand. Card and pass. Simone gave her both. Margaret scanned the pass again. The screen turned green. Rosa saw it. Simone saw it. Margaret closed the approval window before anyone farther back in line could read it. Then she entered R17. A yellow warning box replaced the green screen. Margaret turned the monitor toward Rosa. Restricted access. Rosa frowned. But it approved before... Go refill the soup. Rosa did not move. Now! Rosa lowered her eyes and stepped away. Simone kept her voice even. Is R17 automatic or did you enter it manually? Margaret's face tightened. Stop interrogating my staff. I asked about the verification. You asked with an attitude. A few students began watching. Near the drink station, Colleen Price raised her phone towards Simone. Margaret held up the pass. These are for approved family guests. That does not mean anyone can walk in and use one. My name is printed on it. Names can be typed. Then call the office that issued it. We do not interrupt administrators every time someone brings us questionable paper. The office was 1 building away. Its number was printed on the pass. That would take less than a minute, Simone said. This is not a negotiation. Nyla stepped forward. She's my aunt and my legal guardian. Margaret turned to her. So you admit you brought an outsider in to use your meal benefits? No. Family Services gave her a guest pass. Do not raise your voice. Nyla had not raised it. The students behind them heard the accusation, but not the distinction. A whisper traveled backward. Meal fraud. Simone looked at the pass in Margaret's hand. I'd like a written note showing that you confiscated that document and my card. Margaret stared at her. A record, Simone added, with the time, your name, and the reason. Margaret's voice rose enough to carry. People do not receive receipts for fraudulent materials. They are not fraudulent. That is your statement. It is also easy to verify. Margaret seized the tray and dumped the soup, bread, apple, and milk into the trash. The bowl struck the bottom with a hollow sound. Several students flinched. Colleen whispered into her phone, "They caught a parent stealing student meals." Simone watched the pass disappear into Margaret's apron pocket. Please preserve the transaction record. Margaret smiled. You are in no position to tell this university what to preserve. Rosa stood beside the soup station, pale and silent. A man in a gray jacket approached from the side entrance. His badge read, Bryce Halden, Risk and Compliance. Margaret met him halfway. Unverified visitor, invalid pass, possible account sharing. She refuses to leave. Bryce looked at the yellow box. R17, he said. The system flagged it. Did you review the status before the code was entered? Simone asked. The final status is what matters. Was the code entered by the system or by a person? That is an internal procedure. Bryce held out his hand for Simone's card. Margaret passed it to him but kept the temporary pass. Both items were taken together, Simone said. They should remain together if you are making a report. Bryce's tone cooled. Your concern for procedure does not change the fact that you are in a restricted facility. This is the public dining hall. For authorized users. Nyla pulled out her phone. I'm calling Family Services. Margaret covered Nyla's screen with one gloved hand. No one is calling anyone until security arrives. That was the moment the misunderstanding ended. Margaret lifted her radio. Security, main dining hall. I have an aggressive adult refusing removal and attempting unauthorized access. Simone did not move. She has not been aggressive, Rosa said quietly. Margaret turned. Did I ask for your opinion? Rosa looked down. 30 seconds later, Officer Lena Grant entered. She looked at Simone, the discarded meal and the phones pointed toward them. Margaret stepped into her path. She used a student account, challenged staff, and refused to leave. Simone said, I used a temporary family pass. The issuing office can verify it. Lena looked at Margaret. Can we call them? We already verified through the system. She had not. Bryce said, the visitor needs to be removed while we complete the report. Lena faced Simone. Ma'am, come with me. Am I being detained? We are clarifying what happened. Then note the time and note that my card and pass have been confiscated. Margaret rolled her eyes. There it is again, the attitude. Lena reached toward Simone's elbow, not roughly, but in full view of the room. Simone stepped away and placed her hands at her sides. I will walk. The crowd parted. As Lena escorted her toward the security doors, Simone looked back once. Margaret removed the meal card from her apron and handed it to Bryce. The temporary pass stayed hidden in her pocket. Then the doors closed between Simone and everyone who had seen the truth. The security doors closed behind Simone with a soft, hydraulic hiss. For 1 second, the dining hall stayed quiet. Then the room filled with the low, uneven sound of people deciding what they had just seen. Some students looked toward the trash. Others looked at Nyla. Most looked at the phones already raised in the air. Colleen Price stepped away from the drink station and turned her camera toward herself. A parent was caught using a student meal account, she said in a hushed, urgent voice. Staff asked her to leave and she refused. She had been standing less than 20 feet away. She had heard Simone ask for verification. She had watched the screen flash green. But the version she chose was cleaner, simpler, and easier to repeat. Within minutes, her video began moving through group chats. One comment called Simone entitled. Another said Ashford had become too generous with outsiders. Neither person had been in the room, but certainty spread faster than correction. Nyla saw the first caption over a classmate's shoulder. "Meal scam at Ashford." "That isn't what happened," she said. The student lowered his phone, embarrassed, but he did not correct the post. Margaret returned to the center of the serving area and raised both hands. "Lunch service will continue," she announced. "Our staff handled a potential fraud incident according to policy." The words settled over the room with the weight of something official. A few students picked up their trays. Chairs scraped again. Conversation returned in cautious pieces. Margaret had given everyone permission to move on. Rosa remained beside the soup station. She had watched Margaret close the approval screen. She had watched her enter R17. She had heard Simone ask the one question nobody else had thought to ask. Now Margaret leaned close enough that only the kitchen staff could hear. "No one discusses internal transactions with students," she said. "If anyone asks, the system flagged the pass." Rosa looked toward the security doors. Margaret followed her eyes. "Do you understand?" "Yes," Rosa said. Her voice was barely audible. At the edge of the room, Marcus Reed held his phone low against his chest. He was a sophomore reporter for the student paper, and he had learned the previous year that posting first did not always mean telling the truth. He saved the original video to the paper's cloud folder, then turned off every automatic editing feature on his phone. Near the end of his recording, a strip of light reflected from the stainless steel guard behind the register. He enlarged the frame. For half a second, the word "approved" appeared backward in the reflection. Inside the security corridor, Simone sat in a molded plastic chair while Officer Lena Grant entered her name into a computer. "I need the time my card was taken noted," Simone said. Lena glanced toward the closed door. "We're still sorting out what happened. The time does not depend on the outcome." Lena studied her, then typed 12:14 p.m. Back in the kitchen, Rosa tore the unused corner from an order ticket. She wrote the same time, along with R17, folded the paper twice, and slipped it beneath the insole of her shoe. It was a small act. No one saw her do it. But it was the first time anyone in that room had chosen the record over Margaret. While the cafeteria decided it had seen a fraud attempt, the first official version of the incident was already being written. Margaret stood at the manager's station with Bryce Halden beside her. She opened the staff reporting form and typed the first sentence herself. "Unidentified visitor attempted unauthorized access to student meal services." Bryce read it over her shoulder. "Add that the system generated a restriction." Margaret typed, "Automated fraud alert confirmed by dining management." She did not mention the green approval screen. She did not mention the temporary family pass, the printed issue time, or Rosa's suggestion that they call the office that had issued it. Rosa entered carrying a replacement soup tray and saw the form on the monitor. For a moment, she thought Margaret had simply forgotten the approval. Then she saw the phrase, "automated fraud alert," and understood that the omission was no longer accidental. Across the hall, Lena sat opposite Simone in the security office. "Did you refuse to leave?" Lena asked. "I asked whether I was being detained. Then I walked with you." Lena typed slowly. "Did you raise your voice?" "No." "Did you threaten anyone?" "No." Simone looked through the narrow window in the office door. Nyla stood outside the corridor arguing quietly with a staff member who would not let her enter. "Please note that Family Services was never contacted," Simone said. Lena added the sentence. A call came through the desk phone before she could save the draft. Provost Alan Mercer did not ask to speak with Simone. He asked Lena whether the disruption had been contained. "She's calm," Lena said. "There may be an issue with how the pass was handled." Mercer paused. "Then document the concern and keep the situation controlled. We have board visitors in the building." The words sounded measured, reasonable, but the meaning was clear. The appearance of order mattered more than the order in which things had happened. In the dining office, Wade Nolan pulled the transaction history. The screen showed approved at 12:14:03. 5 seconds later, Margaret Klein's user credential entered R17. Wade leaned closer. "That wasn't automated," he said. Bryce shut the office door. "The final status is restricted." "But the system didn't create it." "Use the final status in the summary." Wade looked at Margaret. She was already signing the report. On Lena's computer, a new template arrived from the security chief. Her original sentence, "Subject calmly requested verification through family services," had disappeared. In its place was, "Subject continued challenging staff instructions and displayed escalating hostility." Lena read it twice. "I didn't write that," she said. The security chief answered through the radio. "Management clarified the sequence. Use the approved language." Simone heard him. She did not demand that Lena disobey. She only asked, "Will the original draft remain in the system?" Lena's hand stopped above the keyboard. Outside, Nyla's phone vibrated. The email subject read, "Student conduct concern." It accused her of assisting an unauthorized guest and warned that further misuse could affect her campus privileges. Nyla looked through the glass at Simone. Simone could not read the email from where she sat, but she saw the color leave Nyla's face. The report had begun as a way to describe the event. Now it was becoming a tool to decide who would be punished for it. By the time the report reached Simone, the language had hardened. Attempted theft of meal services, refusal to comply, escalating hostility. Lena placed the tablet on the desk between them. "They need your statement before they decide whether to issue a removal notice." Simone read the first paragraph without touching the screen. "This says I used a student card." That is what dining reported. "I presented a guest pass issued in my name." You can explain that in the comment box. "If I sign this, the false sentence remains above my signature." Lena glanced toward the wall camera. "It is standard wording." "Then the standard wording is wrong." Through the glass, Nyla watched the adults talk over Simone as if she were not the person the report described. She pressed both palms together to stop them shaking. Simone caught her eye and gave the smallest nod, asking her to stay calm without saying a word. The security chief entered with Bryce behind him. Bryce carried Simone's meal card in a clear plastic sleeve. The temporary pass was still missing. "We are not conducting a trial here," Bryce said. "This is an administrative safety matter." Simone looked at the report again. "What action supports the word theft?" Bryce folded his arms. "The system identified unauthorized access." "What action supports hostility?" "You repeatedly challenged staff." "What action supports refusal?" "You did not leave when directed." "I walked out with Officer Grant." Bryce's expression tightened. "You are trying to turn a routine concern into a technical argument." "No," Simone said. "I am asking what happened." The room went quiet. Lena looked at the timestamp on the report. Security arrival, 12:19 p.m. She remembered checking the wall clock as she entered the cafeteria. It had been after 12:23. Simone saw her pause. "Officer Grant, when did you arrive?" Lena looked toward the security chief. "Approximately 12:23. "The report says 12:19, Simone said. "If the first time is wrong, the sequence built around it may also be wrong." There was no triumph in her voice. She simply moved the tablet back toward Lena. The security chief reached for it. "We can correct a clerical issue." Lena locked the screen first. "I want to compare it with my body camera marker," she said. It was the first time she had spoken against the room rather than inside it. In the cafeteria, Marcus sent Rosa a message through the student paper's secure tip form. He asked only whether she had seen the approval screen. Rosa did not answer. Instead, she photographed the order ticket hidden in her shoe. The image preserved the handwritten time, R17, and a faint soup stain from the moment she had folded it. She sent the photograph without her name. At the dining office, Wade opened the transaction log again. Bryce stood behind him. "Remove the duplicate views," Bryce said. "We do not need confusing preliminary screens in the final packet." Wade hesitated. "The event history will show the deletion." Then call it routine cleanup. Wade clicked once. Across campus, an automatic system message appeared on Simone's phone, visible only for a moment before the device dimmed. Meeting moved. Are you safe? She typed 3 words. Preserve dining records. Then she turned the phone face down. A minute later, Wade's screen froze. Access restricted. He tried again. The same message returned. The report could still be rewritten. The record beneath it had just stopped cooperating. The access restriction changed the temperature in the building. Bryce left the security office without explanation. 10 minutes later, Provost Alan Mercer arrived with the careful expression of a man who wanted every problem reduced before anyone important saw it. Ms. Avery, he said, we are prepared to let this end as a misunderstanding. Simone remained seated. Where is the temporary pass? Mercer glanced at Bryce. It was determined to be invalid. That was not my question. Bryce opened a folder. The torn edge of the pass showed between 2 pages. Simone stood. That document belongs with the card you took from me. The security chief stepped between them. Sit down. Simone did not move toward Bryce. She only pointed to the paper. I am asking that the item be preserved. The chief closed his hand around her upper arm. The pressure was firm, public, and unnecessary. Simone shifted 1 foot back to keep her balance. She did not pull away. Please state why you are restraining me, she said. Lena rose from her chair. She is not resisting. Mercer looked toward the open corridor. Students had gathered beyond the glass. Several phones were raised again. Move this out of view, he said. The chief released Simone, then positioned himself between her and the door. Margaret came down the hallway carrying the missing pass. There, she said. This is what started the entire problem. Rosa followed several steps behind, holding a stack of kitchen forms against her chest. Simone held out her hand. Please return it. Margaret looked at Mercer. It has already been invalidated. Then return the invalid document. For the first time, Margaret seemed unsure. Bryce reached for the pass, but Margaret pulled it back. Perhaps she thought possession still meant control. Perhaps she understood that the printed time could undo every sentence they had written. She tore the pass in half. The sound was small. It silenced the corridor. Margaret dropped both pieces into a gray shred bin beside the office door. There, she said. Now there is nothing left to argue about. That sentence changed the room. Rosa's face tightened. Lena looked at the body camera light on her uniform. Mercer stared at Margaret as if she had stepped beyond the protection he had planned to offer. Before the shredder could start, Marcus Reed moved from the student crowd. He reached through the open side of the bin and pulled out both pieces. The security chief stepped toward him. Marcus held the paper against his chest. Student press. You cannot take internal property. It has her name on it, Marcus said. His voice shook, but he did not let go. Simone looked at him. Do not alter it. Put it in an envelope. Write the time and the names of everyone who saw you collect it. Marcus nodded. Mercer turned to Simone. If you sign a conduct acknowledgement, we can remove the trespass concern and conclude this privately. Put the offer in writing. Mercer's jaw tightened. He ordered Simone escorted not outside, but into the administrative conference room upstairs. As Lena walked beside her, the crowd separated again. This time, no one whispered that Simone had stolen anything. They were watching the 2 torn pieces of paper in Marcus's hands. The mistake was no longer only something people remembered. It had become something someone had tried to destroy. Marcus did not leave the corridor with the crowd. He carried the 2 torn halves of Simone's temporary pass into the student paper's office, 3 floors above the library, and set them on a clean sheet of printer paper. His hands were still shaking. Professor Julian Hart, the faculty advisor, closed the door behind him. Did you take that from a restricted area? Hart asked. It was in an open shred bin. Margaret Klein tore it in front of everyone. Who saw you recover it? Marcus named Rosa, Officer Grant, Provost Mercer, the security chief, Simone, and at least 20 students standing behind the glass. Hart brought out a brown evidence envelope. Marcus placed both pieces inside without fitting them together. Hart wrote the time across the seal, then signed beneath it and had Marcus sign beside him. They uploaded Marcus's original video to the paper's protected server. No caption, no edits, no cropped version. The file kept the minute, second, device ID, and location data from the moment he pressed record. In the administrative conference room, Simone sat at the far end of a polished table while Lena stood near the door. Nyla had been allowed inside, but no one had offered her a chair until Simone pulled one out herself. "You should have told me this was happening," Simone said quietly. Nyla stared at the conduct warning on her phone. "I thought if I stayed out of the main line it would stop." "How long?" "Since my second week." Nyla opened a folder of screenshots. 3 meal plan denials. Each one showed enough balance for the transaction. Each one carried the same code, R17. Simone did not touch the phone. She looked at Nyla instead. The screenshots mattered, but the hollow place beneath Nyla's eyes mattered more. "How many meals did you skip?" Nyla's eyes filled, but she refused to let the tears fall. "Enough that you noticed." Across campus, Rosa locked herself inside a supply closet. She removed the order ticket from her shoe and photographed both sides under the fluorescent light. The paper showed 1214, R17, and the faint stain from the soup Margaret had thrown away. Rosa opened the anonymous tip form again. Her thumb hovered above the screen while she pictured Margaret erasing her weekend shifts, then asking why Rosa was suddenly unreliable. This time she added one sentence. The screen said approved before the manager entered the code. She pressed send and immediately deleted the browser history, though she knew Margaret could still cut her hours if anyone guessed. Lena made her own choice more slowly. She emailed the first draft of her incident report to the secure archive attached to her work account, preserving the version number before the revised language replaced it. Then she marked the body camera recording for review. The red indicator had remained on when Margaret tore the pass. By late afternoon, the smallest details from the dining hall had begun moving away from the people who wanted them forgotten. And the green words Simone had seen in the first second no longer belonged only to her memory. Provost Mercer entered the conference room carrying a folder and a gentler voice. "Ms. Avery, I believe we can resolve this without causing further harm to your niece." He placed a 2-page acknowledgement in front of Simone. It promised to remove the temporary trespass concern, withdraw Nyla's conduct warning, and refund the guest meal. In return, Simone would confirm that the incident resulted from a misunderstanding, and that Ashford's staff had acted in good faith. Nyla read over her shoulder. "They want you to say Margaret did nothing wrong." Mercer kept his eyes on Simone. "It avoids unnecessary escalation." Simone flattened the pages with one hand. "Who drafted this?" "University Council." "Then I would like a printed copy with the drafter's name and the time it was issued." Mercer's expression shifted. "This is a courtesy, not an evidentiary document." "Then there should be no concern about giving me a copy." He left the papers on the table, though his hand remained on them for a moment, as if he regretted creating something Simone could keep. Elsewhere, Marcus and Professor Hart compared the cafeteria video with Colleen Price's public upload. Colleen's version began 6 seconds earlier. In those 6 seconds, the reflection behind the register showed the green approval screen clearly enough to read. It also showed Margaret's hand moving to the keyboard before the yellow warning appeared. Hart leaned closer to the monitor. "Save that frame separately, but do not alter the source file." Marcus nodded. In the security office, Lena opened her draft report beside the final version. Her sentence about Simone requesting verification had vanished. The arrival time had changed from 12:23 to 12:19. The phrase escalating hostility had appeared under her name. She called the security chief. "Who changed my report?" Management clarified the timeline. "Management was not wearing my camera." There was silence on the line. At the dining office, Wade told Bryce that access to the transaction history had been restricted. Bryce lowered his voice. "Then use the report already generated." The report says the flag was automatic. It was the final system status. That is not the same thing. Bryce looked toward the hallway before answering. Do not create a larger concern out of a handled incident. Wade said nothing, but he copied the deletion error message onto a sticky note and put it inside his wallet. By 4 o'clock, Mercer scheduled an emergency conduct review. The official notice accused Simone of unauthorized access, disruption, refusal to comply, and interference with staff operations. The notice contained no mention of the valid pass, no mention of the approval screen, no mention of Margaret tearing the document. Simone read it once and placed it beside the acknowledgement she had refused to sign. Nyla asked, "Are you going to tell them they're wrong?" "They already know parts of it are wrong," Simone said. "The room will show us which parts they are willing to defend." When the review chamber opened, a folder waited at Simone's seat. Nyla stopped at the doorway when she saw it. Simone did not react. The tab did not carry her name. It read, Respondent, Unidentified Visitor. The emergency conduct room looked less like a courtroom than a place designed to borrow its authority. A long walnut table divided the room. 2 board members sat at one end beside University Counsel. Provost Mercer took the center seat. Margaret and Bryce sat together. The security chief stood near the wall, while Lena remained by the door. Rosa had been placed in a chair by herself. Marcus sat beside Professor Hart with the sealed envelope on the table between them. A woman Simone knew as Aisha Bell entered last and took a seat marked External Observer. She did not greet Simone. She only gave her a brief nod. Mercer opened the meeting. "We are here to review an unfortunate dining services misunderstanding that escalated because several people failed to communicate clearly. The wording distributed blame before a single record had been examined." Margaret folded her hands. "I acted on a system-generated fraud restriction. Ms. Avery became confrontational when normal policy was explained." Bryce added that R17 was an automated safeguard, and that staff could not override it based on a visitor's personal explanation. Mercer turned to Simone. "You will have an opportunity to respond." "I would like the records reviewed in the order they were created," Simone said. University Counsel looked at Mercer, then at Aisha. Aisha spoke for the first time. "That is a reasonable request, Mr. Mercer." She called Simone Ms. Avery, but her tone carried an unusual respect. Mercer noticed it. He did not understand it. Marcus's video came first. Professor Hart explained that Marcus had recorded the event in a public dining area, uploaded the original file to the student paper's protected server, and preserved its metadata without editing. He provided the device timestamp and the server receipt. The video showed Simone standing still beside the tray. It showed Margaret refusing to call family services. It showed security arriving after Simone had already agreed to walk. Margaret leaned forward. "That angle does not show what happened before he began recording." Colleen Price's public video answered her. Marcus had downloaded the publicly available source and preserved the upload page. Its first 6 seconds showed the reflection behind the register. Approved appeared backward in the polished steel. No one spoke for a moment. Bryce recovered first. "A preliminary screen can change when the system completes its review." Aisha looked at him. "Does R17 appear automatically or does a user enter it?" Bryce's gaze moved to Mercer. "It is part of an internal risk process." "That did not answer the question," Aisha said. The POS event log was placed on the table. University Counsel objected that no one had established how it had been collected. Aisha explained that the school's own information services system had generated a read-only export after access restrictions were activated. The file carried the original server timestamp and a verification hash. At 12:14:03, the pass was approved. At 12:14:08, Margaret Klein's credential entered R17. Margaret said several managers sometimes shared terminals. A badge access record showed she was the only authorized manager inside the register area at that time. Mercer called it a procedural irregularity. Then Lena's reports were placed side by side. The draft said Simone calmly requested verification. The final version said she displayed escalating hostility. Lena's face tightened. "Did you write both sentences?" Aisha asked. "No." The security chief shifted against the wall. Lena continued. "I wrote the first one. I was told management had clarified the sequence." "Was the arrival time also clarified?" "It was changed. My body camera marker shows I entered after 12:23. Mercer said report corrections were common during active incidents. Aisha turned to Rosa. "Ms. Delgado, did you see the screen before R17 appeared?" Margaret spoke before Rosa could answer. "She is bound by employee confidentiality." Rosa looked toward the security chief, then toward Mercer. Simone did not tell her to be brave. She said, "Only tell them what you personally saw." Rosa inhaled. "The pass approved," she said. Mrs. Klein closed the window and entered the code herself. Margaret's chair creaked as she leaned back. Marcus pushed the sealed envelope forward. Hart read the collection time, the names of the witnesses, and the signatures across the seal. Inside were the two torn halves of Simone's temporary pass. Aisha placed her hand on a second folder. University counsel stared at it. "What authority did you have to initiate record preservation?" The room fell still just before she answered. Aisha opened the folder. The first page was a preservation notice issued at 2:14 that afternoon. It covered dining transactions, security recordings, complaint files, staff communications, and every record connected to R17. University counsel read the heading twice. "This notice was issued under an existing compliance review," Aisha said. "Ashford acknowledged that review 3 months ago." Mercer's face lost color. He knew the review existed. He had simply never met the person leading it. Aisha placed the two halves of the pass beside the issuance log from Family Services. The QR number matched. The pass had been valid until 6 o'clock. Next came the POS record showing approval, followed by Margaret's manual entry. Then the badge access record. Then Lena's original report and the altered final version. Then the body camera audio. The room heard Simone ask why she was being restrained. It heard Lena say Simone was not resisting. It heard the security chief instruct someone to remove the sentence about verification from the report. No one looked at the security chief when the recording ended. Aisha added Wade's system event log. His account had attempted to delete transaction views at 1:07. The cloud service had preserved the event after access was restricted. Bryce said, "Those were duplicate screens, routine cleanup." Aisha looked at him. "Why did the cleanup begin only after Ms. Avery asked that the transaction be preserved?" Bryce had no answer. The final document was the acknowledgement Mercer had offered Simone. It promised benefits in exchange for calling the event a misunderstanding. Mercer's voice tightened. "That was an attempt to reduce harm." "To whom?" Nyla asked. Mercer did not turn toward her. Aisha closed the evidence folder but left the preservation notice in the center of the table. "My name is Aisha Bell," she said. "I serve as Senior Enforcement Counsel for the review described in that notice." University counsel looked from Aisha to Simone. Aisha continued. "Dr. Avery, the room now requires your formal identification for the record." Simone reached into her leather bag and removed a slim credential case. She did not hold it up for the room. She placed it beside the meal card Margaret had taken from her. "My name is Dr. Simone Avery," she said. "I lead the compliance review examining Ashford College's use of student support funds and its civil rights safeguards." The silence that followed was not admiration. It was recognition. Every person at the table began recalculating the meaning of the same afternoon. Margaret gripped the edge of her chair. "If I had known who you were, I would have handled this differently." Simone looked at her. "That is the problem, Mrs. Klein. I was entitled to basic dignity before anyone in this room knew who I was." Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it. Mercer tried to recover the meeting. "Dr. Avery, your relationship to a student creates obvious concerns about impartiality." "It was disclosed before this review began," Aisha said. Dr. Avery does not issue Ashford's final findings alone. Her presence today does not erase what your own records show. Bryce insisted the risk system did not contain race as a field. Simone turned to him. Does it use scholarship status? He hesitated. Among other variables. Dorm assignment? Yes. Home zip code? For risk calibration. And did anyone test whether those variables produced unequal results? Bryce lowered his eyes to the table. Rosa began to cry without making a sound. Simone noticed and softened her voice. This room is not deciding final guilt today. It is deciding whether the evidence will survive long enough to be reviewed honestly. She asked that manual R17 access be suspended, that dining and security records be preserved, and that every account affected by the code be identified. She requested protection for employees who had retained records and an independent review of the altered incident report. She also asked that no administrator contact Rosa, Lena, Marcus, or Nyla privately about their statements. Aisha confirmed each action fell within the preservation process already accepted by Ashford. The board chair placed Margaret on administrative leave pending investigation. Wade's system access was suspended. Bryce was ordered to provide the risk model documentation. Mercer was instructed to preserve his messages and step away from witness communications. Nyla's conduct warning and Simone's trespass notice were frozen. None of it was a verdict. Margaret would have a chance to answer. The reports would be tested. The data would have to be examined beyond one afternoon and one dining hall. Simone wanted it that way. Accountability built only around her title would teach Ashford the wrong lesson. The process had to protect the next person who arrived with nothing more powerful than a valid pass. But for the first time that day, the people who had controlled the wording no longer controlled the record. Aisha opened one final server index. A file name appeared near the bottom. National Risk Segmentation, Campus Clients. The file itself was missing. The index showed it had been moved 3 days earlier. Wade said he had never seen it. Aisha turned the screen toward the room. His account was the last one recorded opening it. For several seconds, no one in the review room moved. Wade stared at the server index as if the file name had appeared by itself. Aisha closed the laptop before anyone could reach for it. That file is now part of the preservation order, she said. No one contacts the vendor, resets an account, or explains a missing record outside this room. The meeting ended without applause. Margaret left through a side door, carrying only her purse. Rosa watched her go, then looked at her own hands. They were still trembling. 4 weeks later, the first findings arrived in a sealed packet. They did not declare the case finished or name a final punishment. They confirmed something harder to dismiss. R17 had been entered manually dozens of times, and students receiving need-based aid had been affected far more often than others. 17 earlier complaints had been relabeled as service dissatisfaction. 3 security reports showed unexplained version changes. The board placed Margaret's disciplinary case under outside review. Mercer remained in his position, but he could no longer contact witnesses or supervise the investigation. Bryce had to turn over the risk model and every variable used to score students. Wade's access stayed suspended while specialists examined the missing file. The process moved slowly, which frustrated Nyla. They can change a code in 5 seconds, she told Simone. Why does it take months to admit what it did? Because changing a screen is easier than changing who gets protected by it, Simone said. Ashford made temporary changes before the review was complete. No dining manager could restrict a student account alone. A second employee had to approve it, and the student had to receive a written notice with an appeal number. Security reports could no longer overwrite earlier drafts. The first morning the new procedure began, Rosa stood behind the same register where Margaret had entered R17. A student's card flashed yellow. Rosa did not send him to the sideline. She called another supervisor, explained the message, and handed him a printed notice. The problem was an expired housing update. It took 4 minutes to fix. The student thanked her and carried his breakfast away. Rosa smiled, but when a radio crackled behind her, Her shoulders still tightened. Some things changed before fear did. Officer Lena Grant wrote Nyla a letter. She apologized for walking Simone through the cafeteria when she already knew the room did not feel right. She admitted that she had allowed an altered report to remain under her name because she feared her supervisor. Lena folded the letter, sealed it, and kept it in her locker for 9 days. She had not yet delivered it. Nyla had her own decision to make. Ashford offered to remove every warning from her file and refund the days R17 had blocked her card. She accepted the correction but did not promise to stay. "I don't want leaving to be the only way I get my dignity back," she said. "But I don't want staying to become another thing I do just to prove I'm strong." Simone did not choose for her. 6 months after the tray had been thrown away, the main dining hall reopened after an independent systems review. The assisted meal access sign was gone. Simone entered beside Nyla and joined the end of the lunch line. Rosa saw her and gestured toward the empty space at the front.
"You don't have to wait, Ms. Avery."
Simone picked up a gray tray. "I can wait my turn," she said. "I just shouldn't have to prove I deserve one." She chose soup, bread, an apple, and a carton of milk. The same meal. This time, no one touched the tray except Simone. She and Nyla sat near the window. Around them, students argued about exams, traded fries, and complained about food that was finally ordinary enough to complain about. Nyla looked across the table. "Do you think this place changed?" "Some procedures changed," Simone said. "Now we find out whether the people do." Her phone vibrated. Aisha had sent one image from the recovered server index. The missing file had once contained 28 institutional identification numbers. Ashford was number 9. The other 27 names were redacted. Before leaving, Simone looked back at the line. Rosa was explaining the new appeal process to another student. Lena stood near the entrance, the unopened apology letter still in her jacket pocket. Most people in that cafeteria would never hold a title that forced a room to listen. So the question was not whether they could do what Simone did. It was whether, when the screen said one thing and the person in charge said another, they would look away or help someone preserve the truth. That night, the Ashford file was secured, but R17 still had 27 other places to hide.